First of all, we're going to start talking about the levels of biodiversity. The first level of biodiversity is what is happening at the genetic level. How much genetic variability is there within a single population or between a few populations? As I'm sure I've mentioned ad nauseum, I studied cottonwoods as when I was an undergraduate and as a grad student. And one of the things that we looked at was how much genetic variability is there between these different populations of cottonwoods. And cottonwoods are interesting because whenever there's two different species in the same genus and those ranges overlap, they hybridize. And so we can use this leaf morphology. So if we look down here, this is a leaf, the typical leaf of a Fremont cottonwood looks like. Here's a Fremont cottonwood tree over here. Here we have a narrowleaf cottonwood tree, and their leaves have shapes like this. And when they hybridize, we can look at the shape of the leaf and kind of figure out where it falls along this spectrum. And so we can use that leaf morphology as a gauge of how much genetic diversity there is in these cottonwood trees. We can also talk about species diversity. So we've mentioned this before, where we're talking about the number of species, the species richness, plus also the relative abundance. So how many of each of those individuals of all those species that we find in our area. Okay, so that's what we're talking about with species diversity. We can also have ecosystem diversity, and this contributes to the structure and the function of ecosystems. So we talked about the Arizona life zones, where we have the pinyon juniper forest, and we have the ponderosa forest, and we have the Doug fir forest, and then we have the mixed conifer forest, right? So these are all different types of ecosystems that we find, and so that's a level of ecosystem diversity. So the findings of this paper that was published a few years ago looked at the genetic diversity of this cottonwood hybrid system. And the hybrid system represents the genetic variability within a cottonwood trees. And the researchers tested to see if the species diversity of the insects and the spiders and the other arthropods that live on these trees is related to the genetic diversity of the trees themselves. And what they found really, when we look at this hybrid system right here, these hybrid zone, that's where the researchers found the highest species diversity is in the same place that we had the highest genetic diversity of the host plants.